So here's the thing. So, dude, we have 7 seconds to make our first impression. And we don't even know what we want to talk about.
Yeah, don't put that on me, man, because I'm not going to do it right. I mean, it's so funny how you can obsess about getting this exactly right, in that 7 seconds. That's
right, and there's not a way, But so why do you want to share what you've come to?
Well, I like this idea of being better beings. I think both of us are on this path of trying to be better. And not to say that whatever we were before was terrible. It's not like we're trying to fix things. It's just how do you live a life? On my deathbed, reflecting back on what I've done in my life, I'd like to have as few regrets as possible. So
right.
How do I do that now? What are the things I could be doing better? How do I make that happen?
And of course, the thing is, it's like you have life experiences that brings you to it. And that was a big,
You're right.
It's a big part, for both of us, that it's like, okay, these things happen, and then you see, what's happening to you and what you see happening in the world, and now, what do I do about this?
Isn't that
what
funny?
can I do about that?
Yeah, the perspective you have when you're 18 is so different from the perspective you have at almost 50.
Right.
And so, we don't know what's the driving force behind us getting together, if it's COVID or the Trump era or almost turning 50.
Right.
You can't tease those things apart. But luckily we're here, and you have your stuff and your recent history. I have my stuff and my recent history, and I think we're better off
sharing it together.
Doing this together.
Yeah. That's the thing. I want to share it with you because it's like, to me, we've come to the same, we're orienting ourselves towards the same goal. And I would call that goal truth. That's I think the cool thing about it is we might not call things the exact same name,
Totally.
But we're orienting ourselves towards the same direction. And then we came at it from different directions, which I think is so cool because you add a dimension. It's like you were telling me about your sister, saying how smart.
Yeah,
your sister.
Who's smart? She's brilliant in her own right.
And and it's like the way, and you bring something that I can't offer. It's like a different kind of knowledge, right? And then I'm sure I bring something
totally.
that you don't offer, but coming together, and it's just cool because we're coming together on it. And it's like we knew each other, just in passing.
But didn't know each other.
Yeah, didn't know each other, and then you started the video series or the podcast, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. And that just struck with me right away because of all my earth education experience that, in the one particular program had the first 2 things you earned were knowledge and experience, right?
Right,
and then
weird.
You worked on it yourself and shared it with others. And that's exactly, And then so for you, it came to wisdom.
Well,
Which then you were sharing your wisdom with the world.
Which is funny, that word wisdom. I'm not trying to imply that either one of us is wise, although I think there is all wisdom in people who pay attention, right? There is wisdom there. But in the same way that we're not really trying to be better, we're not aiming for this, it's words, it's semantics. But something you just said from your book, it's the same thing. So much of this stuff, even though, I have a different background, you have a different background, although the ecology part is kind of similar,
You're just at a much higher level than me.
Well, but so that in a quarter will get you a hot cup of Jack's. But yeah, sure, okay, I have some degrees in ecology, but it's the same thing. It doesn't matter the flavor, the color, the decor, that you experience. The experience part and the knowledge part, when they add together, form this thing that can be similar across people. And I think that's what we're trying to do, is reach people that think like that don't want to see some sterile, from the mountaintop sort of, I am the guru who knows all and will tell you these things to do, the top 10 list of how to make your life better kind of thing. It's not that. It's the opposite of that.
Right, yeah. Dude, in my book, I hesitated to use any kind of number, here's the 3 things, but it's just what we're trapped in, in a sense. And that would be, a key point to talk. You've already brought up words and the way we interpret them. And that's just so important to me. And to be kind of specific on that, I think with every word right? There's three aspects to it. So there's the signifier, that's the word or the symbol that represents whatever it is we're talking about. And whatever it is we're talking about is the referent, and there would be a literal thing. So so the signifier is the word cup or mug, either way. And I could be talking about this particular cup or mug, whatever you call it, and that's the referent. This is what I'm talking about. And then there's something signified. If you don't see this cup or mug, right, and I say cup
a picture in my head.
or mug, you have a picture in your head. And maybe if I say cup, you see like a tall, like plastic cup that your daughter drinks out of.
Or a jug protector.
Right. So, and then, but then we talk, so you had something signified. So there's the signifier, the referent, the actual object, and then the signified in your mind. And that's all really great. We can sort that out when it's a physical object that is in the world.
It's material.
It's a material.
Matter.
Right. And then, but the problem is when we get to all these other things like love and compassion and integrity and entitlement and respect and disrespect and even gigantic things like the word God. Like, because you can't put your finger on that and distinguish it. Yeah.
This is awesome. And that's where you have all the power because you've thought about these things and have a better, and I know it's not comparing, but you have a great vernacular for thinking about these things. And so just a little bit of backstory. I got, when Paul listened to the podcast and sort of was like, hey, we know each other, but we don't know each other. And then he's writing a book at the same time. And so I get to read this book and I'm like, holy crap. I mean, he's thought all these things through to a much more fine point. And they are all very similar things. And now I'm building a repertoire, I feel, where I can sort of talk in these terms like this and sort of think and draw. And I find myself going, oh, that's the same thing. Oh, that's the authority problem.
Right.
There's a universal theme to what you've sort of drawn out, and it's a good direction to sort of move for me and personally. So kind of part of my involvement is I want to learn from you. Like our relationship is going to make me better at what I'm trying to do for myself personally. And if that translates out to the rest of the world, then even better.
Thank you. And and then of course for me that's exactly so. I like talking about this, and you like talking about this, and that's fun to do because it's like you keep learning and it kind of grows on itself. It's not like you just get to this level and that's it. So I mean there's so many like topics to talk about, but that just makes me think of like enlightenment. It's not that I would, because people could ask like, well, do you think you're enlightened? Well, no, because I don't think that's a static state that exists, and I would compare that to like education. Like you don't get educated and are done. It's like a constant process, right? And then even the things you know about are going to come back to it, and maybe it gets deeper and deeper, and you just add one more level on it, and then you're going to be tested every day in your life, even if you think you do have like, okay, these are the things. Like in my book, I have like a lot of ideas of how to deal with people. Mm-hmm. And of course, I mean, I think they're good and good tools to use. I mean, that's why I wrote it. But every day I'm tested with the ability to use them actually. And of course, there's days where I fail miserably.
And that's what's anti-guru about it, or anti-influencer about it, is you're not making any claims to say that I have achieved this perfect state and you need to be like me. Isn't being human crazy?
Right.
How do we do this more comfortably?
Right. Well, so dude, what? I mean, how did you even get on this path?
Well, yeah, that's great because I want to hear your story too. But it's like, I feel like my life is very bimodal. Like I said before, something's happened around 50, like whatever you call that. Something. I remember who I was as a kid, and I used to say, my colleagues, when I was a professor, we're always around 18 and 19-year-old kids, and they're sort of the bane of your existence, right? Because they're annoying as crap when you're like 30 to 40, and they think they know everything. You remember being 18, and one of my colleagues said at one time, how stupid is it that we let 18-year-old kids decide what they're going to do for the rest of their lives? And he was referring to that idea that you pick a major, and in many ways that sort of leads you down the path of the next 30 years, or can. And I used to think, yeah, wow, it's brilliant. He's so smart. We're idiots at 18. And anyway, long story short, I find myself at 50 looking back at my 18-year-old self and going, I'm more like that guy than I am like all the guys I was between then and now. So what's going on? It's this like bimodal thing. So I was motivated at 18 to sort of gaze at my navel and learn about philosophy and read about the occult. You know, I got like whatever wasn't normal, like non-conformist to a T. I didn't grow up with religion, and so I was curious about every religion except for the ones that I saw around me. Got into indigenous cultures and all of that stuff. Really wanted to have psychedelic experiences and have those sort of spiritual experiences, and did a bunch of that crazy stuff. And then as I got more serious about school, kind of got more into more into alcohol and less into smoking weed, less of a psychedelic experience and more of just how do I deal with my anxiety. And then got some pretty pronounced anxiety, got serious, took myself seriously, became a professional, was a professor. And then
so as that was going on, dude, did you have to, you were depending more on the escape that alcohol provided?
Yeah,
or the experience of psychedelics?
I mean, for me, it was a thing where I used, if you will, weed in a psychedelic way. Like I did it in order to open the doors of perception and all that shit that you hear, you know, and that's why. And then eventually it became habitual. And then I switched it for alcohol. And yeah, for me, that represents sort of an abandonment of the spiritual quest to a degree, and more of a cover it up. And then when I quit all that stuff, I found myself plagued with extreme anxiety. I mean, I don't know if I've told you this, but I had what's called a metaphobia. My anxiety manifested itself in the fear of vomiting in public.
Okay.
Which sounds hilarious, but it was crippling. I don't remember any class from grad school because I would be sitting in the class white knuckling, being afraid that I was going to spontaneously vomit and having to know where the door was. And so stopping my drug use and alcohol left me like unable to cope. And so that's led me to self-help and therapy. And then I got divorced, and so that like blew that whole thing up, and I was like desperate to sort of figure out, how do I be better? I'm a broken, not broken, but you know. So when you rekindled that.
So when you got divorced, that did create a mindset that you were, I mean, I don't want to say that like you were a failure, but in a way, in your mind, were you thinking like, I'm a failure?
Are you kidding? Yeah, and that goes back to like my childhood of feeling like I wasn't good enough. Like my parents didn't give me the attention I needed. And I know all this because now I've experienced real healing with a life coach sort of situation in something called internal family systems, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about. But yeah, it sort of blew all that stuff in my face. Like, look, man, here's all the stuff you're going to have to deal with. And we all have this stuff, right? And a lot of it is childhood trauma. A lot of it is part of those experiences maybe aren't so good. You know, part of the knowledge maybe isn't so good. If there's a benevolent God, why do we feel pain? Why does he give kids cancer? You know, that's something we struggle with. And so, yeah, the last 10 years or so have been about trying to get some footing so that I can move forward on a path that's, you know, healing on one level, but better.
So, dude, we brought up like the idea of an enlightenment, and so enlightenment sometimes can be thought of as two ways. That it's like the moment that like everything changed, right? Like a definitive moment, or like that it kind of happens over time. And so, again, not to say that either of us are enlightened, but the idea of taking the next step, which is a developmental structure, is what it is. It's a growth step. Was there a definitive moment that you felt, or did you suddenly one day wake up and looking back and be like, oh my, I have come this far?
Oh yeah,
like,
right.
You know what I mean? It's like been like this, or both. Right?
Yeah, it's so funny because to me that is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
I never understood the monolith. Like, do you know that movie? Like
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, this monolith appears at random moments in the movie. Okay. And you're like, it's a big giant, I don't know, obelisk. It's just like a big tower and I never knew what that meant, but what it is, it's punctuated equilibrium. So my point is, in ecology we talk about gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. Did a bat's wing evolve because one bat was born with a wing and it could fly and it changed everything? Or was it a gradual thing that happened over millions of years?
Okay.
So that's exactly, it's just, I have to point out anytime there's like an ecological analog to what you're saying.
Yeah, no, that's why your sister says you're so smart. So what, punctuated
equilibrium versus gradualism. It's two sort of...
So the punctuated equilibrium is the instantaneous.
Yeah, you have this moment of clarity. And then, well, and the example in 2001 at the very beginning is fire. Lightning strikes, these apes have fire, and they're like, oh, everything's changed now.
Right.
Punctuated equilibrium. It wasn't gradual. Didn't have fire in the morning, had fire that evening, and it changed. So I'd say most of it's gradualism. But I have had moments working in IFS where I'm like, not in the moment, but moments later, I'm like, oh, that was a massive shift. Nothing is going to be the same from here on out. So it's both. Yeah.
For me, dude, that was really, it's both too, which I mean, that's a common answer out of me.
It depends.
It's both, but there was a couple like definitive moments. And so, like I felt like I was raised Roman Catholic, and it was a good experience for me for most of my childhood and into college even, where, I went to church every Saturday or Sunday, in the Catholic church, you went Saturday or Sunday. And probably for my first 2 years of college, I went all the time. And, I actively, participated in, like, trying to be a Christian of my understanding of it at the time, right? During Lent, like a lot of people kind of will just think like during Lent for 40 days, like, will you give up something or whatever? Well, and that can be true, but like more so it's like trying to think all the time about what that represents. Mm-hmm. So, like during college, like I think they actually give you in Catholicism like a nail to carry in your pocket. And so that's like, a constant reminder. And, I would walk the steps every day up my...
That's so crazy.
Up my dorm. It was like only 5 floors or whatever. But like doing that every day. So it was like constantly kind of in your mind. Yeah. That's what you're trying to do. Which now years later, I mean, I don't think I understood that.
Yeah.
But I would say that there's an aspect of that is completely right? That's what you want to maintain all the time.
Wait, don't tell me it's... something brand carry water or whatever, right? That this is the
chop wood carry water.
Chop wood carry water. Is that what you're talking about?
No, okay. That's actually, but that probably is connected, to it. That, like, it is connected to it, and that's a good one. Good job. So it is connected to it because it doesn't matter. Okay, so if you are in whatever enlightened means, if you have taken a growth step up, right? It doesn't mean that everything in life here goes away. It doesn't mean that you don't have to, you're not an active participant in life anymore. The world doesn't look different to a degree. It can look different, but it doesn't, like the piano still looks like the piano, right? Things aren't like big blobs like blurring together or whatever, right?
Right.
And you have to still chop wood, carry water. So the saying, I believe it's like a Zen proverb, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. You've got to do the things you have to do. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Well, I just heard that
still have to
when
do
you're
that.
talking about the nail and the walking the flights of steps. I was thinking you still have to do the things you're supposed to do.
Right, and then it's having that mindset all the time, right? So if you have taken a real growth step, and so we could even talk about tons of what that mindset actually is, because I mean a very specific Catholic Christian mindset might be kind of perceived one way, but I would actually argue that it's actually the same, but it's supposed to be the same thing that you and I have come to.
Oh, yeah,
I gotcha. It's not that.
Right. Just different semantics, different words, different story.
Yeah. And so, so then, so to be completely honest, church and going to church each week, 2 things. One was a weekly kind of thing, and one was a definitive moment, was every time I just felt like they were just asking for money. And it was like, first of all, I'm a college student, I don't have any money, but it would seem like this is all that's really matters. It's really about this organization, which is the individual church. Business. It's the business of the church being able to carry on. And of course, I mean, there can certainly be value to that. But then the second thing is when, I finally had sex. And
you weren't married.
I wasn't married. And I went to...
Spoiler alert.
confession and said to the priest, I'm sorry that I'm not sorry at all for having sex.
Oh, wow.
And,
because it was awesome.
Right. Yeah, for 10 seconds. For 10 seconds. It was the best 10 seconds ever. That poor priest, he said to me, well, it's good you don't, this is the only thing he could say in a way. He said, it's good that you know you should feel sorry. And it's just like, but I don't feel sorry. Yeah. I don't.
But you should, or you wouldn't be saying.
Right. And it's just like, well, why should I feel sorry? Yeah. You know what I mean? And that goes actually to all the, the shoulds. The shoulds. Yeah, right. That was a should that was told to me.
Well, it's hard to say religion isn't.
Yeah.
A bunch of should. Man, that's. Yeah, I got to say, it blew my mind to sort of find out that you had not the traditional love-hate relationship with religion. You were into it for a while until you had a moment where you had to question it. And it seems a lot more in the spirit of scientific investigation, going, okay, what's going on? You didn't just say, screw all this stuff, I'm going to party and never think about it again. It was...
Maybe for a few years in college.
Well, yeah, I mean...
So...
that was my approach.
Well, but then how do you not in college for lots of reasons? And then after, I probably, at that time, maybe, I would have even said to you that I am an atheist.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, okay.
And of course, spoiler alert on that, I would tell you not to call yourself anything now. Don't identify as any one thing. But at the same time, if asked, so I think there's something, isn't it one of the most astronomical high percentage of people now say they are spiritual but not religious.
Yeah, right. It's becoming... And I just read an article I'll have to share with you that basically says we're all pagans.
Okay.
Because what we think pagans are, we're Christians' way of sort of painting them as being nefarious, evil people.
Right.
But actually, we're... Anyway.
Right, yeah.
We're paganistic, spiritual, whatever.
And then the other thing, too, is the group... They identify themselves as none, what religious...
Interesting.
And so they said none, which I always laugh because that's the catch-22 of what I say of don't be anything. It's well, I'm none. Well, that's your label. So there's that political...
labels.
Right. There's a political group called No Labels. And I'm well, what did they become? They became the No Label group.
Well, it's going back to me. I remember thinking I was a non-conformist, and then I remember I found the other 4 non-conformists in high school. And I was why are we all the same? We're conforming, we're non-conforming.
We're so non-conformist, we're exactly the same. Right. That's awesome.
Well, we're not them. Well, no, but it's exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. It's the label thing really screws. It changes it, right? Instead of it just being an experience, now it has to be an experience that's restricted by all the assumptions and whatever that go behind this.
Right.
Atheist or agnostic or...
Right, because all of those terms, that goes back to the signified in the mind.
Totally.
If I say atheist or you say atheist or agnostic or Christian or Muslim or Jewish or whatever, is probably something is signified in the mind.
Yeah, in every individual mind of every person involved in that conversation. Which I've said this to you before, it amazes me that any two people can ever have a conversation and walk away from it feeling understood or that they understand the other person fully because how do we do that? So I think, spoiler alert for the future episodes, there's something else going on in us besides the verbal communication that help us sort of fill in those blanks. And
maybe we should call the show Spoiler Alert.
Well, that's just because it's the first. This is the first.
But it will. I have a feeling that might come out a lot. Right? Spoiler.
This is something we'll talk about in the future.
So, yeah. So, dude, just to kind of wrap. I mean, not to go on.
Well, no, keep. You didn't finish.
So then after college, shortly after college, I went and hiked some of the Appalachian Trail, and part of what to me was being connected with the earth, be connected with nature, and you could even think of it as somebody would call it capital N nature, right?
Mm-hmm,
It's really, it's nature doesn't necessarily exist as one thing. It's a whole collection. So I mean, I would say that God and nature are the same thing, right? Now, people will argue that a little bit, and that's a nuanced idea. But so that was important to me to get, to be connected with nature, and to, I also cared about the earth deeply as that, man, we need to take care of this, and of course then, at the time, like, are you, you're in this kind of like naive and idealist kind of idea, like this is just the way it should be.
I don't need
like
money.
We could start right. I don't need money, and we should stop driving, gas guzzling cars, and whatever, like all the coal and all those things. Like it's got to be different, and then like because you just don't even understand the complexity of that, right. And then so that was kind of the trajectory for a while. So I was reading things like Conversations with God and the Celestine Prophecy and Ishmael by Daniel Quinn and all those. So again, I was spiritual but not religious. And then, I came to a definitive moment in 2011, and that my aunt had just passed away. And I was at the post-funeral gathering dinner I was sitting at the table with my cousin and my cousin's husband. And I was kind of just been in a funk or whatever at the time. I think I was working at the tavern still, and whatever was going on personally. I just said to him, I can't remember why I even exactly said this, but I'll never forget it. I said, I don't know, I just feel so disconnected. And he looked at me, or through me, right, and said, disconnected from what? And it was like, oh.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you're like almost 40.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm 39.
Yeah.
In that year, I turned 39 that year or whatever. And, so here I was on this path, right? But this was a moment that, like, it was, it's punctuated.
It was punctuated equilibrium.
Equilibrium, right? It was a definitive moment, right, where I said, okay, there is something I'm connected to, right?
And want to be, and...
Right, and that's the desire, because I said, I don't know, I feel so disconnected. Well, like, if you don't want to be, you wouldn't have said it, so you don't care. And so that thing, of course, spoiler alert, can be called a lot of things. God, nature, the divine, the spirit, the great mystery, whatever. It can be called a lot of things. But that exists, that whole. And so, like in my book, I call it the one big whole, right? That exists. And then since then, so the last like 10 plus years, that has just only grown, that growth has continued. And I described it at the time, like that opened a floodgates where that was all that I wanted to read about and learn about and consume to be that, because it was like, okay, I'm connected to it. What does that mean? How do I act now?
Yeah, right.
That is true. So how do I act? And then it really kind of, it started to take focus here in the last couple years, where, two specific things I would see on Facebook all the time. And the one is just, of course, that we should love our neighbor like as ourselves, like one of the two commandments out of the Bible, considered two greatest commandments in the Bible. So we should love your neighbor as you love yourself. And the other one is, it was a meme, and it just said, if we could spread love as quickly as we spread hate and negativity, what an amazing world we would live in. Well, those two combined to really focus my direction that I was going, because so the one thing, of course, who doesn't agree that we should, spread love as quickly, or spread love to create an amazing world? Like, everybody agrees with that. But also, nobody doesn't think that they're the one spreading the love, right?
Right, because everybody thinks they're right.
Right, yeah, because so either side, right, so if we're talking like politically in the U.S., like the Democrats think that they're the ones that are spreading love and are loving everybody, and the Republicans are thinking they're the ones that are spreading love, by the way, kind of a little more conservative approach, of course, that it's it. And of course, both sides have aspects that are right. And that was a big thing. And so those two things focused me, where I was like, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean to actually spread love? And I cannot let out the thought simultaneously. I have to realize that the other side thinks they're spreading love too. Right. So I have to try to understand them. I have to.
Well, I mean, that's fast. A couple of things that really hit me there is, one, that same thing you were after on the Appalachian Trail, and I mean, knowing you, I didn't realize this until just now. That's the same thing I was looking for through psychedelics. Like I thought we're both knew something was out there.
Yep.
We knew something. We're compelled, and I like to think that's part of our nature, whatever you call it. We just humans do that, and that's what makes us better. Is the closer we get to it. So hopefully, people want that too. And then the second thing is, if you would have asked me even a year ago about this love thing that you just talked about, I think I would have poo-pooed it and laughed it off and sort of said, yeah, whatever. But something happened to me in the last year where I sort of realized, yeah, that actually is. I mean, you said something to the effect of who doesn't think that by sending more love out into the world, you're going to fix things. I think there's a lot of people that don't think that. I think there's a lot of people that think that's bullshit. You know, a lot of people that are just like, it's that rugged individualistic thing that we have in America. It's like, I don't give two shits about you. In fact, I give less than that. I don't even give one. I don't give half of one. And that's what makes me meaningful, whatever, like part of my identity. So there might be a harder sell with some part, probably not our audience, but to some people might not see that. And I was resistant. But now I am on board.
Yeah. And so my question to anybody that resists that, because I do get that totally, is, so are you, especially if you are specifically identifying yourself as a Christian, then you should be connecting yourself with that we should love our neighbors as we love ourselves. Now, if you're not, that does throw that out, right? And so if you're not connecting to that can throw that out. Or
you're just a hypocrite. I mean, you could be a hypocrite Christian.
Well, right, yeah, and it could be that, and that you're missing that aspect of it.
Right.
Oh,
yeah, that's a better way to put it.
And that's the way like that I think about it, because it's. People will think a way or they behave a way, or they want to behave a way, but they miss something of themselves, and they leave that out. And it's like, oh yeah, this is just the other way I'm saying it, right?
Right.
So this is loving your neighbor as you love yourself. What does that actually mean, right?
Right.
And so that always goes, and we've talked about this a lot, man. But like the golden rule, right? And, a lot of times the golden rule gets misinterpreted, that it's a selfish thing, it's a loophole. I've heard people say that there's a loophole in the golden rule. No, there's no loophole in the golden rule. If you think there's a loophole in the golden rule, you don't understand it. That's the point.
Well, and talk about that. Yeah. Well, explain that a little bit better, because when I first heard you say it, I struggled with it. So people are... Because I think it's awesome.
I probably have to go read my book to remember. So the golden rule, right, that...
do unto others as you have them do unto you.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, so a couple things just on that. It's in every culture, religious tradition, whatever. It's all through history, right? So what does that mean? Well, do unto others as we would have do unto ourselves. It doesn't mean that I do unto you as I want done, right? That's not what I would want. I would want you to take my thoughts, feelings, my culture, my heritage, all of my things into consideration fully, and understand that of what to be. So it's not it's not a selfish act. Yeah. It's not a selfish act.
What's like egocentric. You don't impose your own wants and needs on someone else. You take theirs into account.
Right.
And that becomes the.
And it's a step of growth. And so so this is what's funny about this is, so you have to, when you really think about this, do unto others as you would do unto yourself, right? It requires that you love yourself first to truly do it, because you cannot give away what you don't have, right? So if you don't love yourself, and it's a difference that you come to, right? That matters. So you have to. It's like the cliche of, putting on your gas mask first on an airplane. Like, yes, you have to do that simultaneously with considering the others. Like, you're putting the gas mask on to save yourself, to help others. Like, those two things go together.
Yeah, and what you just said is what like makes me want whatever you're laying down so bad because it's so inherently obvious to you. Like I think, like for me, and I don't know how many people I represent, but that whole loving yourself first thing, that's a hard thing to hear because you have to first say, well, maybe I don't. And then nobody wants to say that. Everybody's going to say, well, yeah. So you sort of bleep over it. And you were alluding to this before. It's sort of like you just sort of, you think you're a good Christian even though you may not be doing the good. And you sort of ignore that. And then you just sort of bleep ahead. So when somebody says, do you love yourself? I think most of us go, yeah, of course I do. And bleep forward through that without really thinking about what that means, what that feels like, what that looks like, and what it means to do that every day. And that's so back to what you said earlier. Everybody thinks we're right. We think we're coming from this position of course I'm like that, but you've never really done the work. Yeah. And that's what I've learned in the last year is there's a lot in that, a lot more than there seems to be.
And I don't think and there's no end to that. Right?
No, it's a
you're
lifetime.
going to keep coming back to
a dynamic process.
Right, the interactions with other people that are going to allow yourself to do that, and then your body is changing as you get older or whatever, and things that are important to you to a degree, might not be as important later, but like you still want to like look good and feel good and take care of yourself. It might be kind of a different ratio, right? You know what I mean? And you feel yourself, like as you're getting older, you feel yourself slipping, right? And things that's like, oh man, like my eyesight's not as good. And it starts going away. And so it doesn't mean that you just like loving others, like you don't abandon taking care of yourself. Like you have to take care of yourself. Like you have to, right? But then that it's a slippery slope to greed and selfishness. So
totally, man. We're gonna. That's 2 episodes right there. One is narcissism, the difference between self-care and selfishness.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of how do you love yourself? Like, and what does that mean? I mean, those are 2 topics that. Spoiler alert. Yeah. But it's so funny how we think we know what something means. And that's at least like 4 of the topics we talked about. You think you know what something means, but you really don't. Like, I think that's just human nature. But there's also a little bit of arrogance in there. And I'm more guilty of this than anything. Like, when I got into my schooling, the first thing that in graduate school you get is like, all right, you're an idiot. Let's just admit that. You're 23 years old. You don't know what you think you know. And I'm older than you. And all of us are going to explain to you why you're so dumb. I mean, that's part of like it's almost like militant and getting broken down. And so and so part of this whole being better being thing is you have to build up the skill set to be wrong, to start over, to unlearn, and to sort of dynamically, know that this is a part of it. You don't just unlearn today and then learn and then you're right forever. Right. You continually and it's I think the Taoists have this thing of non-doing. Where it's sort of like whenever you think you're getting ready to impose some reason or explanation about why you're so smart or why you know all this stuff, you just don't do that. You open up yourself for change and growth and actually understanding what these things really mean.